Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining Pérez Art Museum virtually. My name is Marielle Ortiz. I am curator at PAMM. Tonight, we're hosting PAMM's live studio visits with artist Marielle Plaisir and PAMM's Andrew W. Mellon, Caribbean Cultural Institute coordinator, Iberia Pérez González. Our live studio visit program is presented with the generous support of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and features local artists sharing their practice through virtual visits with PAMM curators. PAMM is a 21st century museum dedicated to enhancing the understanding of communities here in South Florida. In 2019, PAMM started the initiative of the Caribbean Cultural Institute, which is dedicated to promote the understanding and appreciation of Caribbean art. For more info, you can visit cci.pam.org. Tonight, I'm thrilled to present Marielle Plaisir, one of the most exciting Caribbean artists working in Miami. Before I introduce Marielle, I would like to thank the incredible PAMM team that makes this studio visits come alive. Thank you to our curatorial team led by René Morales, and including Jennifer Ignacio, Maritza Lacayo, and Iberia Pérez, and myself, as we dive into deep conversations with the invited artists. Thank you to Anita Brayman and Jennifer Ignacio for organizing the logistics behind this event. And thank you to our amazing AV team, Dennis Faxas and Andrew Bird. I would also like to mention the upcoming studio visits for you to mark your calendars. Next month, on February 11th, I will be in conversation with Johanna Ramaham. Then on March 11th, Jennifer Ignacio will be in conversation, doing a conversation with Adrián Ros Dionta, followed on April 8th by artist Clara Varas in conversation with Marisa Lacayo. And on April 22nd, we have artist Edison Peñafiel with René Morales. My deepest gratitude goes to every artist that had accepted the invitation to participate in PAMM's live studio visits. This evening, we're joined by Marielle Plaisir, a French Caribbean multimedia artist who combines painting, drawings, installations, and performance to present intense visual experiences. She studied fine arts at the National School of Fine Arts of Paris, followed by a double course at the School of Fine Arts and Decorative Arts in Bordeaux, France. Plaisir has participated in numerous international biennials, group shows, and solo exhibitions throughout the world. Select recent solo and group exhibitions include Acta et Fabula, the piece is over 2020 at Locust Projects here in Miami, Black Models from Jerry Cole to Matisse 2019 at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and at Memorial Act in Guadeloupe, Visionary Aponte, Art and Black Freedom 2018 at the King Juan Carlos I of Spain, at the New York University, and Power Plant Gallery at Duke University, Georgia. And Dog Specks of the Sea, contemporary sculpture from the French Caribbean, Haiti 2017 at the Hunter Gallery in New York. And in 2020, this exhibition was presented here in Miami at the Little Haiti Cultural Center. If you value this program and other programs presented by the museum, please consider supporting us by going to pam.org/donate. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Marielle Plaisir and Iberia Pérez González.
Thank you, Maria Elena, for this kind introduction. And thank you, Marielle, for accepting this invitation to share your work with us in this live studio visit. I'm really excited to be in conversation with you tonight and very much look forward to discussing some of the main themes in your recent body of work. Before we start, I would like to remind the audience, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to post any questions you may have. And I promise we'll do our best to answer them as we move along the presentation. So Marielle, before diving into the discussion of the works, I thought that perhaps you could share a little bit of your background for those in the audience who are not familiar with your artwork.
Yeah, Maria Elena, good evening. Maria Elena did a great presentation, so I'm going to add a few words. I am a French Caribbean multimedia artist originated from Guadeloupe, which is a Nova-Sea French department of France, like Martinique. I was born in France, north of France, Normandy. I raised in France, and at the age of 16, my father decided to come back to Guadeloupe. So I did my high school in Guadeloupe, but I studied in France, Fine Art School, Bordeaux and Paris. And I am living in US since 5 years now, working in Miami, and I am a Oolite resident artist. My work examines since a few years now the concept of social domination and explores issues of colonialism alongside those of race and class through a range of different media, installation, performances, painting. I am first a painter, drawing, films, and photography. But as a Caribbean artist living in US since not a long time, I also underline the common issues between the US Black history and the Caribbean history. That's really the focus point in my work, studying the labor movement, for example, but more deeply the fights for equality through literature, philosophy, and history.
Thank you. I think we can, I'm sorry?
In a few words.
Yeah. No, I think we can start looking at some of the works from your most recent series titled The Malediction of Sham, or The Curse of Ham, which is actually a biblical reference, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about the title and why you chose this specific title for the series?
The Malediction of Sham is a series of backlight, drawing, paintings that I started in early 2020. But the process began in an historical research in which I came across the curse of Sham or Ham. It's a part of the ancient Bible, and in which there is a part of the story that has been described, and this story is pretty simple. Noah was drunken, and so he drank a lot of wine, and he was asleep, and his younger son Sham saw him nude. Noah cursed him and tell him, "You will be cursed, and your skin will be darkened and burned for a generation." And this short part of the Bible has been taken to justify the slavery and upon the Black population in US and in the Caribbean. So this part of the Bible is, for me, is a myth, but I am taking it like a metaphor to explain the Blackness and different stereotypes that exist until now.
Maybe you want to share a little bit about the context of how this series came about?
Yeah, and I use the backlight when I did a different research, but my question was, how can I highlight the Black body? How can I move more or deeply explain my narrative, the Blackness and the different stereotypes? How can I highlight the Black body? And finally, the answer was pretty simple. I can highlight with lights. And the backlit is it's a sort of box with light. And so I took this concept and I work different pictures like a collage with different personalities in conversation with others' personalities. Like Muhammad Ali in this backlight, in conversation with a white person, maybe it's a king or a prince, but Muhammad Ali is for me the metaphor of the Black person, of the Black population, in conversation with this other character, which is a metaphor of the supremacy, the white supremacy. But I am imagining a sort of beautiful world. It's a dreamlike world with beautiful things, with in the background an archive painting or engraving from the Caribbean, with some spots of inks. And it's an enchanted world in which I think those two characters are in conversation, but they are not fighting. There is no dominant, dominated people. They are just in conversation, and maybe it's the world I am imagining with our domination, with love and peace and humanity.
Yeah, so besides the exuberance of this, oh no, can you go back, please? Yeah, thank you. I wanted to mention something about this work that caught my attention. And besides the exuberance of the vegetation and the landscape that we will talk about in a little bit, I couldn't help noticing that figure of the owl that is standing in the corner of Muhammad Ali. So yes. I was wondering if, owls tend to be symbols of wisdom and endurance. So I was wondering if there's any symbolism attached to this figure in the context of this work.
Not exactly, actually. The title is Mother, Why is Everything White? Mm-hmm. This title comes from an interview Muhammad Ali did in 1971, explaining how he was curious as a child, trying to understand the difference between the black and population and the white population. So Muhammad Ali is wearing a white clothes, and it's just the dog is white, and the cape of the prince is white, and it's a way to make a line between all of them. And I think it's the only explication I have, but I wanted to realize just beautiful pictures, attractive pictures, to go to with poesy and a lot of beauty, and with constellations, natural forms, flowers, inspired both by my Caribbean roots, but including the idea of utopia.
Of course. If we move to the next slide, we can see, because you draw in this series, you draw on a wide roster of African-American figures. And in this case, we see the figure of Maya Angelou, who is this American poet, writer, performer, and civil rights activist, actually one of the leading voices of the Black experience in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit more about this work?
The general, when I use different characters for their own personality, but primarily for the fights they did for equality, civil rights, and but I am very inspired by all of them. Muhammad Ali, because he was an incredible person, fighting with a lot of humor, and that's important. Maya Angelou, the fight of Maya Angelou, but also is her poems, her books, and she was a strong and powerful activist. And using those personality, I am interested by their fight much more by their body. It's a metaphor. It's what they are explaining, and what I am very inspired by them.
So this image that you selected here, which is quite an iconic image of hers, like from her early career as a dancer and performer. So the fact that you selected this specific image is not necessarily important, let's say, to the message that you're trying to convey?
This picture is important. You know, when I am searching in research of different personalities, I think I have maybe 100 photos and pictures about the same personality, but I am trying to find the most how can I say that? I don't have the word, but um, the most persistent or position in the position they have to be in conversation with the other character that represents the supremacy. And Muhammad Ali was a little bit mocking the white supremacy. The same thing for Muhammad Ali. It would be the same thing for Josephine Baker in the next slide.
Yes, we'll talk about that, but before we move on, we just got a question from the audience. Sabina Cetrin, she's asking, did you consider the symbolizing of Ali himself to African Americans?
Yes. Yes. I think Muhammad Ali was more than an athlete. Ali challenged the limited notion of blackness, of black identity. So that's an important point for me.
Thank you. I think I want to dwell a little bit more on this image and go back to the process of making of these works. Like you touched upon that a little bit before when you started talking about the series and the backlights. But I wanted to go back to these because I remember that when I first saw these images, I saw them online and I didn't understand at all that these were like light boxes, or also the dimensions of the works were not, I couldn't, understand like how big they were, or their size, or how they were constructed until I actually went to your studio and I saw them in person. So I wanted to show this slide to also give a sense to the audience of how the work is constructed. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into these images, no? Like you were talking, this involves like collage, and then I don't know, can you go over that again a little bit? Explain a little bit your process?
Yes, I am doing first a collage with different parts, photographies, and in the background, the archive picture. I am composing everything through a software. It could be Photoshop or another one. And then the picture is printing. Sometimes I can put some color for the dog, for example, and it's like a painting for me. I am trying to find a sort of balance between the colors, the different orientation of the different point in the picture. So it's really a collage, in fact. And after the picture is printing on Duratrans paper, and I am intervening on the paper with inks.
Right. And I think this aspect of the light, sorry?
And after the picture is framed with strong and strong fabrics. Here the fabrics is black, and it's part of the work. It's a painting for me.
It's a painting, yes.
Yes, it's a painting.
But this aspect of the light, which unfortunately also here is not as perceptible, but it's actually very central to the work and very important, because basically what you're doing is appropriating like this visual technology that is commonly used, for example, in advertising, no, like in the cinemas and so on, but you're not using it for a commercial purpose. So you're basically using it to foreground, using the light to foreground like these narratives of Blackness and to give visibility to this, to the social and political themes in your work. And I think that's actually something very important. if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. We have a legendary figure, jazz musician, Miles Davis. Can you tell us a little bit more about this one?
Miles Davis was an horrible person, an amazing musician, but an horrible person. Miles wasn't really political, much like he wasn't really religious, but Miles was music. And however, he always considered jazz to be a possession of Black America. And that touched me. I love Miles Davis music, as well as I love the poem of Maya Angelou, Attitude of Muhammad Ali. So those personality push my narrative. And in the, like in the other slides, or the backlit, it's the same thing. Miles Davis is representing with a lot of humor, with his fingers and the fire, and this other character representing the supremacy in conversation with him, but there is no fight. It's a sort of glamour moment. And the monkeys, the birds, the spots, the colors. It's a sort of enchanted world. I love this idea of the reverse of the world, a good world, a sort of a world could be in the reverse of our world.
Yeah, and something else that stands out in this image for me, more so than in the previous one that we've seen, is the landscape, actually, no? So it is, let's say, in the background of the image, but to an extent, it does have a certain protagonism, at least in this one. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, the aspect or the role of the landscape and this image, which is an archival image, right?
Yes, all of them. It's also a question of freedom. Caribbean, for me, the first image I have in my head, the first images are the landscapes, the flowers, the nature. For me, it's nature. It's a sort of luxurious nature. It's freedom. And I mean, the background characterize the idea of freedom.
And there's also like this other element that we've seen as well in the previous images, and it's the presence of the dog. And I think that is quite a symbolic aspect in your work, right? So can you talk a little bit about that? It's not the dog as the loyal friend that we're used to, no? This is a hound dog, correct?
No, yes, no, it's not. It's not a good dog. Here it is, but the hunt. It's the dog is in the Caribbean memories. It's also in my memory. The hunt for slave was a real armed expedition with a pack of sulking dogs. And during the period of slavery, the relationships between slaves and dog was one of violence and fear. And the dog is still present in the collective memory through the fairy tales, Caribbean tales, Creole and Caribbean tales, and legends. But I also remember that when I was in France, I was young, my father talked about those fairy tales from the Caribbean, but he was also talking about the history of kings of France. So I grew up with those two components, the Caribbean fairy tale and the history of France. And through my work, I think, maybe you can feel that the European part and the Caribbean part And as a mixed child, I think it's a sort of melting pot in my memory.
Yeah, can we actually go to the next slide? You previously mentioned humor in your work. And here in this image, I think this comes through very clearly. No, this is the image of Josephine Baker, who was an American-born singer, dancer, well known for her burlesque performances, but was also a civil rights activist. I don't know, what can you tell me about this image and maybe the role of humor in your work?
I think this picture highlights really the kind of humor in this series of backlight. I don't know if she's mocking the supremacy, but it's funny. And Josephine Baker played at the beginning of his career the role of the white supremacy, dancing with the bananas belt, and sort of eroticization of the African female. Even if Josephine Baker never visited the African continent. So she was playing the game, building a sort of fantasist image of the African population, but it was a game. And in the middle of her career, she became really a civil rights activist. Mm-hmm. So through this backlight, I mean, I think you can feel that.
Yeah, no, definitely. She appears here with like this cross-eyed and doing like this silly pose, as if she's almost ridiculing the figure of the man, no, that's next to her. Yes. Yeah, so it's and the humor here is not necessarily like entertainment, but it's more like a subversive kind of humor, right? So these,
yes, correct.
Trying to find alternative means to express criticism or challenge certain ideas, right?
Yes, correct.
If we can move on to the next slide, here we can see how you have developed this series, The Malediction of PAMM or Sham, through your paintings. And here we have the figure of Aretha Franklin, also known as the Queen of Soul. And she appears here like surrounded by this sort of like garland of flora or vegetation of some sort, but also like the composition also evokes like this theater, like a theater stage, which brings to mind your background as a scenographer. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about your background in theater or in scenography and how that has influenced your artistic production.
Yes, I when I was in Fine Art School of Bordeaux, I had to choose between different options, but I took art and scenography. I feel very good with the notion of cinema, of theater. And I think through all my work, performance or installation, I always have a scenograph point of view. And in this painting, it's Aretha Franklin performing. It's like in a scene of theater with those sort of curtain made on feather maybe, but she's in the middle of the world, in the middle of the theater. And but this I am first a painter. That's very important, and I think that I am always composing my work, all my work as a painter. The backlight for me is a painting. The installations for me are painting. When I am performing, it's a painting. For this painting, I could title him Strange Fruit. It was inspired by a photograph of two Black teenagers who had been lynched in Indiana in the 13 or 14, I don't remember exactly. But they were accused for the murder of a white man and for the rape of his wife. And The Strange Fruit is the title of one of a song. And those two black bodies hung from a tree for all to see was the strange fruit described in the song. In this painting, as or in the other painting and all the series of work from the Malediction of Sham, it's also a question of the black body first. Mm-hmm. And this one was in link with the murder of George Floyd.
So you created this work during the period of in the summer when all of these protests were going on.
Yes. Mm.
I remember seeing this work in your studio actually, and it was completely different. I think it was obviously like an earlier stage. And you were telling me about your process of painting, like you apply layer after layer. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and when do you decide that the work is done? No? So when do you finish? Because this is something like a completely different artwork than the one I remember seeing.
Yes, when I am painting, it took a lot of time. I think it's not depending of the format, but I think I feel very good as a painter. I feel really good. Painting is my home. But I took a lot of time painting because my process is to paint layers after layers and layers and layers with transparency and different minuscule and minutious things that can appear in the work, and it's a lot of work and a lot of time. Actually, I am starting maybe 3, 5, 4 painting at the same time, and I never know when I will finish them. Sometimes I am starting a painting, and 2 months after I am coming back to this painting. It's like for me, it's like an equation that I have to resolve, and.
Right.
With the colors, the composition, and in this one, I started to embroider the canvas by hand. It's a lot of time also, but the embellishment and the notion of beauty, of love, of humor, of serenity, it's part of the process.
Yes, before we move on with another one of these black painting series, there is a comment here by Anu Mitra, who is saying that he says, there are so many references to the British colonial era portraits where the master stands in a contrapposto with his best friend, his loyal dog, at his side. But Marielle infuses irony into the figures, so his power becomes deflated and he's powerless. This is done very effectively. So I guess that's a compliment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you. So in our next image, we see here how the background starts losing some of the density that we saw in the previous painting. The figures are also kind of devoid of any physical traits. And the color black becomes much more dominant. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the use of the black color in your paintings?
Yes, I counter the concept of anti-blackness by representing the color black first itself as the subject of my painting. The previous one we saw, Franklin was maybe the only one with a lot of colors. And all the series of paintings, the black background is really black. Rather than using ready-made black paint from the tube, I choose to create my own shade, utilizing all the colors I have to find the strong and powerful black color I need. chemically, the black is all the colors we can find in the nature and in the universe. It's Johannes Eaton. So that means, I don't know if you can imagine how powerful could be the black body. If in interiority, the black population have all those magnificent colors in the world, it's a way for me to embellish the black body and to dignify, magnify the black body. And that's important. When I am working, I am painting, it's layers and layers and layers to find the right black color. That means it's not the black, I am not composing the black first with the palette with different colors. I am finding this black color through the layers.
So directly working on the canvas.
Yes.
Yes. We can also see that in the next image. I actually love this work. Here we have again the figure of Maya Angelou, but instead of being surrounded by this exuberant nature like we saw in the light boxes, the figure here appears more like floating in a more kind of abstract kind of landscape. And so one thing I wanted to ask you as well is about the repetition of certain figures in this series. So is that intentional? What?
It's intentional. I think I didn't finish to work on Maya Angelou and Muhammad Ali and Miles Davis. It's a long work because I am reading and reading and listening and listening. I am a French Caribbean artist. I am trying to understand the US history. That's very important because I know that there is a common point between this history and the Caribbean history. And that's passed through the philosophy, through history, through the monuments, through everything I can take to push my narrative. When I am working, I am listening Cesaria Evora, Miles Davis, and a lot of songs, and I need really to understand. It's like being part of the world, and it's like pushing also my narrative. And it's like if I wanted to find the details to include them in my work.
Yes, another interesting element here that I wanted to point out, it is a very subtle, but it's the embroidery that is hand sewn into the canvas. And it's a shame because you can hardly see it, like, or at least I cannot see it, the image is so small, but it's there. So, and it's a detail that appears recurrently, at least in this series of works. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you, so that's embroidered directly on the canvas, right?
Yes, but the embroidery, it's a sort of embroidery, but at the beginning, it's made with different round shapes, and I am realizing some lines with those round shapes. It's embroidery, but I don't know really if it's a chain of that I turn in embroidery. I don't know exactly. Right, I think I don't have the explanation of the shape of the embroidery in the painting. But I know that it's a way to embellish, but it's also part of the Caribbean memory. It's part of the colonialism. The embroidery, the laces, and all those kinds of porcelain, and it's in link with the colonialism.
Yes, someone was just asking about the meaning of the chain like forms, but those are not necessarily chains, right? Those are like because there are two things. So there's the threads that are hand sewn into the canvas, and then there are this smaller element, or like also a recurring element that could seem like a chain, but it's like an embroidery, as we're saying, and that is painted with ink, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think we can also appreciate that in the next slide. This is actually the last example that we'll be showing from this series of black paintings. This one is depicting Eartha Kitt, also an American singer, songwriter, actress, dancer, comedian, and an activist, actually very critical of the Vietnam War, for example, and later became a vocal advocate for LGBT rights. Can you tell us more about this work?
It's a little, this one and the previous one has been realized at the same time, the same period, and you can see that the character is in the middle, in the sort of universe with constellations, and so I did them in the same way. Of course, Eartha Kitt was an activist, a woman, an outspoken political activist, and yeah, I think that in this one the black color is a little bit more dense. It's the first painting with in which I try to explain the idea of blackness with the black color.
And then you also work here with like, well, you cannot see it, the embroidery again that recurs in the works. Maybe also we can talk about that in the next series of works that are works on paper. You also developed this series in paper, and here we have the figure of James Baldwin, one of the most important voices of Black experience in America, writing particularly during the 50s, late 50s and 60s.
Yes,
but I think that similar to the Black paintings, the figures here appear completely like extracted from any specific spatial context, and also are also kind of floating or levitating. So there's a lightness to these works, which gives them a certain like poetic aura. So I was wondering if there's any symbolism, or is this idea of lightness that's something important in these works?
Yes, first of all, the practice of the drawing is the first exercise I did before starting a work, an installation, in any kind of work. So it's the first exercise I did when I am starting my journey at the studio. It's drawing. Why? Because the drawing, it's easy, it's light, it's spontaneous, and I love that. When I started the Malediction of Shamsiri, I started by the drawings, and I experimented the work with inks, with the marker, and with the gold thread using the sewing machine. And the white space of the paper is very important because it highlights the character in the middle of the page. It's like for the painting, the white character, the black background highlights the white character. So it's the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, and you say it, it's like a sort of unbearable likeness of being.
Yeah, and there you're quoting that famous book by Milan Kundera, right?
Yes.
which was very significant for me during my college years.
Yes.
We have a question here. Well, we have a question from a member of the audience. They say it seems significant when you cannot see it, either the details of the body or the details of the body, of details of the painting. Can you talk about the significance of opacity? Can you talk about the significance of opacity in these works?
Opacity. I think I don't see the opacity in the work. I think when I am working with the inks, it's the same process that in the painting. It's layers after layers, and for me there is no opacity. It's lightness. It's a sort of the character is floating, and even if I am working with some dark inks, it's like if everything is floating in the air.
Right, and then you also add this also subtle detail that again probably people won't be able to appreciate very well, but the Swarovski stones, right?
Yes. Yes. It's I created some delicate renderings that includes the inks, the gold thread, and the Swarovski stones that you can see really them, but they are included in the sort of lace around the body of Baldwin.
Right, and that's interesting because it ties in also with your textile-based artworks, which we'll see in a little bit, and that also then connects these works with your practice in design. Can we pass to the next slide, please? And then we have again another one in this series of works on paper, and now with the great Nina Simone, who is hands down one of my favorite jazz fingers. Can you tell me a little bit more about these works? I think that the golden threads are a little bit more perceptible here in this piece.
Mm-hmm. In this one, the Baldwin was the first one, and this one is the last one. So there is, in this one, there is more work, and the notion of nature is really present in the drawing. And in this one, I use more Swarovski stones and more gold thread, but you can see it in the picture, but I also use the point of the sewing machine without thread. So that means it's another graphic line made with walls in the paper.
Yeah,
and it's more complex. This one is more complex than the previous one.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it lends also like a visual cohesiveness to the whole series, also as you move across the different media, no? Yeah. We need to move a little bit faster because we're actually running out of time and we do have a few more slides to go. So this next one is the work that caught my attention precisely because you incorporate text in this work, which is quite unusual, at least from in this series or for what I've seen. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I know why the cage bird sings. That's the title of the first book of Maya Angelou. So I use the same title, like a repetition, like a leitmotif in a sort of a snake's line. And as I explained, I am listening and a lot of poems and different things when I am working. And I was always, my first language is French, not English. So I am very attentive to the words, and sometimes I didn't understand. So I have to listen the same words again and again and again and again to understand what does it mean? And I think it's a link with this process. Listening music is a process in my practice.
Maybe we can move to the other one. I think here we start to switch gears a little bit. And maybe we can talk a little bit about your work as a textile artist. This is a piece from a series of tapestries that you created in 2018. Can you talk a little bit about the use of fabric in your visual production?
Yes, I am not considering myself as a textile artist. I think I am not. Using the fabrics, it's just like using paintings. Maybe it's more in links with the sculpture, but I always try to find the best material to express my narrative. It could be the light for the backlight. Here it's the fabrics. But this painting was the first time I used the fabric as a frame. The fabric is here embroidered like the canvas in the bottom of the painting. The Divine Comedy is the title of this painting. Here I present my own version of the Divine Comedy from Dante's long narrative Italian poem. I think that it's very well known. So I bring a vision of hell and paradise from the point of view of colonized population in a sort of pictorial universe with the intersections of myths of the Caribbean, of the history of domination and supremacy. It's quite surrealist.
Yeah.
You can see the image of the dog twice. The conquistador, it's part of the mythology, the death, and different things that appears, and the spots started to appear in my work.
Yeah, I think we're actually running out of time, and we have a few works, but maybe we can just like jump to the last slide if we can. Denise, yeah, let's move forward, please. Yeah, let's move forward. And the next one. Yeah, let's finish with this one. This performance piece that you performed in, is this a laundromat, I think in the North Miami, right?
Yes, correct. It's in a laundromat in North Miami. The performance acta non verba, that means you have to act instead of talking. That means we have to do something. We have to act. We have to be present in the world. We have to do something to change the world. This performance is at the center of my work since my exhibition at MoCA Museum in 2016, and here I am performing on site instead of in a museum like I did in France, in the Museum of Aquitaine, in NSU Museum, in MoCA. And that was very interesting because I am wearing this sort of, this real colonial dress. It's not a costume. In a space in which people are working, watching the close of the days during hours and hours, and it's like a sort of interaction because between me wearing this colonial dress representing the power, and behind me the clothes turning around and around and around and around. And this little lady, I don't know if she is this one or another one, but one little girl asked, why are you here dressing like a princess?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so she saw that there is something wrong in the space. and that's for me. It was a really a good experience
Yeah, I think
performing where nothing can would be able to see an artist performance, because it's people that doesn't never comes in museums.
yeah, and I can imagine that, you know, the role of the audience or the reaction of the audience to the work changes, no, depending on where you are. If you're presenting this performance at a museum, whereas like, or if you're presenting or performing in a public space such as a laundromat. So that's actually quite important. And unfortunately, we completely run out of time, but I think this is a good place to end. No, like this piece is titled Acta non verba. So it is a good reminder. No, this translates as deeds, not words. This phrase. So it's a good reminder that in order to influence the physical world or create change in the world, we have to actually act upon it and not merely discuss our intentions. So we had a few remarks, and a person from the audience wanted to know what kind of paper you used in your works.
Paper, it's arch paper,
Arch paper.
14 lib. So it's a paper, it's a strong paper, it's a cold paper, and I use different, I try different papers, but I think this one is the best one I use. For this kind of work.
Thank you. So do you have any final remarks before we close the program?
I would like to thank you, Iberia. Thank you so much for your time, for your patience, for the time you take to visit my studio and to prepare this, to prepare the slides and everything, the conversation we have. It's always a pleasure for me to talk with curators because it's opened some doors. And that's amazing. That's amazing. I would like to thank you, PAMM, for this program because it's an amazing program for local artists and to explain our narrative. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we got a message from Remco Jansonius saying, thank you, Marielle and Iberia. Clearly an hour is not enough to visit the studio, and clearly it was not enough. But I look forward to continuing our conversation and visiting your studio again sometime and see how you continue developing your work. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful work with us. Also, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our wonderful AV team, Denise Faxas and Andrew Bird, for making this happen and for all the support they have provided. Like, I literally wouldn't have been able to do this without you. Thank you. Special thanks also to Jennifer Ignacio, Associate Curator at PAMM, for spearheading this program and for all the support provided during the process. And I would also like to thank the curatorial, communications, marketing, and education departments, and everyone else who has helped in the organization and promotion of this live studio program with local Miami artists. Please do join us for the next session of this virtual studio visits. On the next one is on February 11th with Maria Elena Ortiz and artist Johanna Ramahan. Thank you so much again to everyone who's been with us this evening, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you.